Thank you very much. I'm Rene Larsen, and I'm the Secretary of the Sustaining Arctic Observing Networks, and I've been asked to speak to the title, What is happening in the IPY planning when it comes to data management. And I'll come a bit back to where IPY, what it is and where it comes from, but one place to start is to take a look at this, the web page and read their statement about what IPY 5 will, and you can see the full text there to the right. But I've extracted a few keywords here: supporting modeling efforts, working across knowledge systems, provide a comprehensive assessment of the operation and evolution of polar ecosystems, inform and support local to global evidence-based mitigation adaptation solutions. And all of these statements, of course, calls for something about evidence, data, information, and the interesting thing in this context is, of course, what kind of framework will be set up around that. And perhaps to understand that a bit better, what they also have formulated is a set of principles. And one of the principles here is that they will be encouraging open science and open data according to the FAIR and CARE data principles. And this sounds, of course, good in this context. A bit about IPY and the timelines. IPY is the International Polar Year, and this is a bit of a busy overview, but it's worth to note that the early IPY, the fourth one, was in 2007 and 2008. So essentially the whole idea of the fifth IPY in 2032 and 2033 has been developing since then. But it's worth noting here where we are now in the timelines. This piece talks about consultations and engaging polar stakeholders and the research community. So the planning process is supposed to be here, meaning that from now on the processes will ramp up and there will be activities before, during and after, and the planning for these are ongoing. It's also worth noting that IPY knows that it's working in the context of other initiatives, mentioned some UN Decade initiative, UN Decades, but also noting, and that's more an internal process to the polar community or the Arctic community, is that IASC is currently closing what was called the International Conference on Arctic Research Planning, the so-called ICAR process. That process is meant to publish its findings here in 26, and in many ways that work is supposed to identify those themes that should have attention and should be most important in the IPY context. The organization of the IPY, there are different pieces, but key here is what is called the IPY 5 planning group, and it's comprised of representatives of a number of international organizations. And with a bit of luck, you can find your own organization or an organization that you find that you know or are close to. It's worth noting of here, SAON, but also many other organizations that you may be familiar with. Again, the planning for IPY 5, they have organized themselves through a number of task groups, and you can see them here: vision and priorities, indigenous leadership, country and funders involvement, capacity building, and earlier career coordination. And then as the fifth and newest, the so-called data task group, that was formulated by a group of interested people, submitted to the planning group here in the autumn, and it has just been endorsed by the overall strategy of IPY that this data task group will be established. And this means what I'm saying now is simply reflects idea of a group of people that have come together. The real work of this data task group and the real engagement in the IPY planning has not started yet, and this means that there are a number of reservations towards what I say. And I should also say that the points that I bring forward are some that have just again been discussed informally, and it may change when this group gets more active. So that's data task group started by noting that also already in the IPY4 there were deliberations on data management, and as it reads here, that there is a lesson learned that we need to plan data management and sharing policies, procedures, tools early in the process, and that should be in collaboration with the scientists implementing it. And note that for now, IPY5 has not systematically addressed these issues. It also says that IPY4 marked a step change in data coordination, but that IPY5 will provide another opportunity for a major step toward polar data preservation, management, sharing, etc. It is so that at least some of the people that were around for IPY4 will also be engaged in IPY5, so there are good opportunities to bring lessons learned from then back to the current setting. And again, the task group, first of all, thinks of itself as a temporal or fixed term arrangement, meaning that they've given themselves 18 months to do what they call developing an initial data strategy for IPY5, basing these on the fair, care, and trust principles. This means that the task group in its current setting will not develop all the processes, tool, etc., that is meant to support the IPY, but it will develop, as it says, an initial data strategy. And this means that there are many themes up in the air, and this group will try to get a framework about that. So they envisage that strategy will be a set of recommendations, resources, and community engagement activities. And when it comes to who will actually be engaged in all of this, they note that there is an initiative called the Polar to Global Data Group that brings together representatives from the major polar data initiatives, and that's from the Antarctic, that is SCADAM and SUS, and from the Arctic, it's SAON and IASC, but it's also aware of many other, mainly European Commission-driven and funded initiatives like InterNet, Uline, and Arctic Passion. And here is a shopping list of the different things that they want to consider when developing this strategy. And for a strategy to comprehensive, there are many things to consider, but it's also obvious that a lot of this is a mouthful and need to be further prioritized and developed. But they would like to, as a second bullet here, establish an inventory of existing polar archives, data tools, protocols, vocabularies, and systems. They will, as the third bullet here, review existing data policies to determine if there must be a specific IPY data policy. Then they want, here as this bullet, assess connections to other emerging and existing international initiatives, and I'll come back to that because that may be of particular interest to you. Then they want to at least discuss ways of funding data planning, management, and coordination. And then they want to also discuss ethical data and indigenous data sovereignty. And then they want to take, you could say, a full time scale view so that this work is above working before, during, and after the IPY. And for each of these bullets, this interim group has produced a lot of deliberations, but I don't want to go into all of these, but perhaps just go to this one, as I said, assessing connections to other emerging and existing international initiatives, and in this context, SciAS, that may be what of interest to you. So it is about systematically map the landscape of relevant initiatives. They want to make partnership agreements. They want to mandate data and standards interoperability. They will regularly review this, and they would also develop some metrics and knowledge and mechanisms for knowledge sharing. And again, these are headings and bullets, and again, this will have to be materialized more closely. I will skip many of these, but just in the short term, they have given themselves this list of bullets, this task list. So they believe that for IPY, there should be a central coordinating structure and governance. They want to build an open data or open caller data infrastructure, and these people are so wise that they know that this is not just a matter of building this big database that was the goal some year ago. They know that they must rely on existing structures, and what we've seen about metadata harvesting, things like that, is definitely on the radar. As a fourth bullet, they are aware of the need for dedicated funding streams and long-term support. They must be aware of indigenous data sovereignty, capacity building. They want, as I said, review data policies and create a data policy specific for the IPY if this is needed. As I said, the people behind this are, at least to some of you, hopefully known people from the existing polar data community, from the Arctic data, from the Arctic Data Committee, from the Arctic and IASC, and from the South Pole, SUS, SCAN, etc., but also institutional engagement from European and Chinese and American and Canadian groups. I envisage this task group to be open to anyone who is interested. So if you are interested, you can let me know, and I can bring you in contact with some of the representatives here. So what is the current state of planning and doing the work for making IPY a reality? Currently, there is a call for national committees, and that call may or may not have reached you. So there is this idea that the IPY, the backbone of the IPY, will be national committees, and this call encourages nations to establish these national committees and give some guidance about what their mandate should be, how they should be organized, etc. Then there's also a bid out to host an international coordination office. The idea is that, or I should say, the current planning efforts by IPY is undertaken by what is called a more interim secretariat. The idea is to have a more firm and fixed international coordination office, and there's a call now for a nation and institution to host such a coordination office. But then, interestingly, from the timeline that I showed here, during what they called in the beginning, the spring of 26, it may be later, there will be a process where any project can apply for endorsement. So the idea is that also here in the time leading up to you could say the core of IPY, it is possible to submit your project proposals, either new or existing, into some kind of endorsement mechanism. It will evaluate it and give this endorsement. And this process is of course interesting from a data management perspective, because as I said in the beginning, the lesson learned from IPY4 that any effort to organize data for IPY must start early. So the idea would be that also the projects that are endorsed here in the initial phase must have some kind of statement or plan for management of data if it generates data, how it will be managed, shared, etc., following all the principles that we know. So this call text and review and endorsement mechanism is not ready yet, but we have made sure that this data task group is engaged in formulating the criteria for formulating projects and their endorsements. No, I just want to attract your attention to some, first of all, the IPY webpage, but also the fact that If you're interested in Arctic science and data, you may be aware of the Arctic Science Summit Week that is happening here end March in Aarhus in Denmark, and in the same context, the Arctic Observing Summit that happens the day after. These are fora where data and data sharing are high on the agenda, and especially for the Arctic Observing Summit, there is a dedicated data group led by Øystein, a couple of other people, and myself. So you're interested in organizing data, but especially the interaction with other aspects of Arctic observing. This is a place to be. Thank you.